Right, Bruno.
Hi, Mick. I think you can hear me now.
I can hear. Whoops, sorry, I can hear you now.
Okay, I don't know why sometimes the headset doesn't work as it should.
I think Marcel is possibly joining. Prakash is unavailable until 9:30 or 8:30, whatever it is your time.
Oh yeah, he sent me a message that he's not available for the first 30 minutes. Okay.
So
He asked me to go through the notes. I have not seen.
yeah, I've got here's the link to the document, and I've got all the information up for today. Ready.
Yeah.
Morning, Marcelo. So I know one of the things I wanted to have the discussion on is the calendar.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm sharing. I don't even know what I'm sharing.
Yeah, you're
Okay, good
sharing.
for.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's the document we're supposed to have.
Is the document okay?
Yeah, go all the way down to the bottom. But like I said, I've already been putting the notes in for today with the agenda items.
Ah, there it is.
You're a little slow this morning.
No, the thing is
Can I
that
make one
usually
suggestion about these notes? That we actually order them in what's it called? Reverse chronological order, so the newest ones are always on top.
That is nice. It's not always easy.
Yeah, I agree. You have to scroll down to
I mean,
find something either way.
it's a lovely aspirational goal. Yeah. All right. So I have noted that this is something, and I'm just going to turn it over and let Prakash deal with it. But yes, I understand what you're saying, and that would be nice. By the way, just the kind of the requirements that we have for this, even though it's just the three of us, it is an open meeting. So the meetings are, at least in theory, recorded, although I think to actually capture and post the recordings, we have to do something different, and I don't remember what it is. Prakash has that information. He'll be here at 9:30. So because it's an open meeting, it is covered by all of the Hyperledger antitrust notices. So be very careful about making sure that you are not sharing any public information or confidential information. And then the second big thing is that it's an open meeting. Show appropriate respect for all the individuals who are participating in it. So, all right. That's the mandatory. This is Hyperledger, and we are nice to each other. So, all right. Okay. That being said, so there are a couple of things. Prakash did not give me an agenda, so I was adding a couple of things to this that I think we need to do. So the first is the alternate meeting time issue. I talked a little bit to
Sorry,
Marcus about
should
this.
we record this?
It is
because
being recorded.
It's been recorded, okay.
Yeah, and again, I don't have the keys to control, you know, there's a administrator key or whatever that's responsible for this. In theory, Prakash has it, but he tells me he doesn't know what it is. When you get onto this meeting, you will get this meeting is being recorded notice for it. So,
Yeah, that's fine, but I don't see the controls, so maybe it's normal. Okay.
well, there's a request permission to record on this computer, but I don't, like I said, Prakash is supposed to have all of that information because there is a administrator key that he's supposed to have to start with, although he tells me he doesn't have it. But Dave Boswell says he did have it, so we'll figure that out for it. So it
Okay.
is, in theory, I got this meeting is being recorded when I joined notification for it. So, and beyond that, I do not have the ability to record it. So, all right. So back to, are we okay with that? Can I go back to the question
Yeah.
about meeting time? So Marcus's suggestion was that we do it alternate weeks with FPC at the same time of day as FPC. So it would be an hour later on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Sorry, I'm just looking at the calendar. Yeah. So FPC is currently Tuesdays at 4 p.m. GMT, which I believe translates to 9 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah,
If I
because in
got that
Europe
right.
the time has changed already. Usually it's at 8 a.m. Pacific. It's 9 for the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. So the suggestion was that Marcus's suggestion was that we take every other week for the for the FPC calls at the same time. So that would end up being Tuesday. There is a Hyperledger Aries meeting, but I'm not too worried about conflicting with that one. So is everyone okay with that as the time?
So again, what time?
It would be
like 9 a.m.?
I believe it's 9 a.m. or I mean, depending on how things work out with the time zone changes, and I don't know what.
Yeah,
It would be 9 a.m.
yeah. If
Pacific
it's 9 a.m., I can make that
on
work. If it's
Tuesdays.
8 a.m., I cannot on Tuesdays, but I'm typically optional for these meetings.
Again, it will be 9 a.m. for the next 2 or 3 weeks, but regularly is 8 a.m.
No, but
Right.
it's GMT. It's GMT, so it's not.
It's -1 anyway, yeah.
It doesn't
Yeah.
change, Bruno.
But in Europe, the time will change at the end of.
But the GMT time zone, but it's a GMT. The GMT doesn't change, right?
It's the UK time zone. So they're 1 hour behind
Okay,
Central
I'm
European
not
time
sure about
anyway.
that, but usually it's 8 a.m. the FPC meeting.
Okay, which makes this one 7 a.m., but it's not 7 a.m.
Yeah, I don't know.
For you. So all I'm suggesting is we put it on the calendar for that. We download the meeting invite and then go from there. I mean, it could be that we're supposed to start at 9 a.m. this morning, I don't know, or whatever it is, or 8 a.m. my time, 7 a.m. The conversions are bizarre. So I guess I have it in my Google Calendar. I can check there too. Yeah, I'll figure out how to get Anyway, it more or less, is everyone okay with that time, that plan?
I am okay with that. Yeah.
All right. So we'll focus on. Okay, so on the hardware support issues. So we have the PDOTP support. We have the PR for Docker support, and I sent you a bunch of feedback on that, Bruno. And then
On the hardware mode, you mean?
yes.
Yeah. So that.
Okay. And then the TBD is the documentation. From you, Prakash. Which has to include the whole registration process, but it's really the boot process for how to get the ledger going. That's really what needs to be. So are you good with the feedback for the PR? What's your schedule for this? For getting that updated?
You mean again for the hardware mode?
Yeah. So your PR needs to be simplified.
Yeah, I saw the comments. Actually, I saw that they arrived. I still have to go through the comments.
It's basically the gist of the comment is just make a separate target and put the hardware support in there explicitly, so we don't have to screw around with the environment variables.
Oh yeah, so regarding that, so the main reason I did what I did, it's because I think we always said that our environment variable to distinguish between hardware mode and simulation mode and the relative build is SGX mode.
Yes. So just put that set that setting in the target.
But so what does it mean? If it's SGX mode,
so you put the environment variable and you set the environment variable when you build it. I mean, you have to be able to set it for the builds, right?
That's right. But so does that mean that SGX mode? So SGX mode right now is a user-facing variable. We just say, okay, it's not user-facing anymore. The user executes the target that he wants, whether it's simulation mode or hardware mode, but it doesn't touch the variable. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Okay.
So either way, trying to do the Swiss Army knife of every variable in every possible combination, it's still not going to work right now. Because we don't have the dependencies on a hardware mode labeled container. So you have no idea what containers you're pulling out, whether the containers have the hardware support anyway. You're going to have to build them differently with a different label on them.
Yeah, we don't have that, but if we...
And that's exactly what I'm asking for. So we need to be able to, which images need to change for hardware mode.
So, but there is one aspect to consider, which is while building the Docker images, we, well, for the SGX mode variable in particular, we pass it as an argument to the Docker build, and that becomes an environment variable within the container. So if we set it properly, we know.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying a single thing differently than that. You must set it because we build the containers differently. The containers are not compatible. Sorry, the images are not compatible.
Mm-hmm.
You have to build it for hardware. So I can't just use the same compose file because I have to pull a different set of images.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to do an explicit build for hardware support. So just add the targets to build, and I don't remember if it's services or what. I guess
yeah, it should be just the services. Or whatever the target is for the services.
But I think it's just I think that's the only container that really changes, right? Well, CCF, but I don't think even CCF changes at all for it. Yeah, it's just the services. So you need to rebuild the services for hardware. Then you're going to have to change the compose file to pull out the right image. So you just add a target for build the hardware mode version of services. And that's, so you have a hardware mode for services, you have a hardware mode for test, which just picks the right compose file, which has the right services image type.
Okay, so that's okay. So we're gonna have different different label for different images. Something like I don't know what's the name. I think it's PDO services.
Yeah, and
so
just do
we're gonna
PDO
have
services. So be like PDOs, services, hardware.
okay, and the other one PDO services, same, something like that.
Well, it doesn't, just leave it as PDO services. It doesn't have to change.
Yeah, the one that we can currently have. That's fine.
Yeah.
So I actually like this approach more, but I like it more as long as we remove the SGX mode variable completely. Well, not completely. I mean,
we need it inside.
It
No, we need, if you're doing any kind of host install, which is what happens inside the container or outside the container, we need the environment variable. But for somebody who's just building the images, what we're trying to move towards is I have no environment set up whatsoever for PDO. I want to go into the Docker container directory and say make, and it makes the stuff that I'm supposed to have.
Yeah.
And Michael added one more PR that should fix the PDO source root, which is I think the one external dependency we have, and I think that one gets removed. And then I think we're to the point you need no environment variables whatsoever to run the test. With Michael's one in there.
Well, that would be ideal because I have some environment variables in my case.
I mean, we have dependencies on environment variables for the build and the host install stuff. But if you start from a Docker image, you need nothing. You can just say go, and it builds everything with the environment variables that we need.
Okay, I can do that. It's fine with me.
I think the the code that you have for computing the device, it's ugly, but it's necessary, right? I don't have any issues with that. I just don't want this. I want to be much more explicit about I'm building for hardware mode rather than the environment variable and then not knowing after the fact. That's all I'm trying to get to, is to just simplify that.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's based on SGX mode on the environment
Yeah.
variable, so that's okay.
Does that make sense, Bruno?
Yes, I think so.
And by the way, you were at 42 lines. Nicely done.
Yeah, I told you.
I was very happy about that.
Yeah, I'm still not sure about the consequences of well, having the SGX mode variable basically hidden from the user.
Well, it's
yeah,
not, we don't care
hopefully.
about it's not the variable that matters. Hang on 1 second. Sorry, can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Okay. Furnace guy is here, so. All right. So the environment, the requirement for the environment variables, if you're doing host install, is still there, and I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about that. But we're setting defaults for everything inside the Docker image, and that's kind of the point. Is since we control where everything goes inside Docker, we don't need the full flexibility, with the exception of kind of the distinction between hardware and simulation. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and the other thing is the enclave signing key, but I mean that's fine with that.
Yeah, my question on that was really, why are you putting that in temp? So are you doing the signing and then removing that key?
Yeah, I'm
Because
treating that as ephemeral.
okay, then just document that your expectation is the key is ephemeral, and that's why it's going into temp.
But I'm also okay keeping that in. I think you suggested
Well, PDO home keys is where all
keys
the keys are
SGX.
supposed to go.
Right. We're not using it right now. At some point, maybe.
Okay.
We may rely on that.
If you're putting it in temp, put a comment in. If you're putting it, if your expectation is that it's more persistent than that, then put it in the keys directory with everything else.
Okay, I think I will change to the keys directory because, okay, it's ephemeral, but leaving it in temp, yeah, I don't know where that is going to end up.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not really important right now, but okay.
Yeah, it just looked really weird creating the key in temp, and I couldn't understand why. So I think just documenting that will be fine.
Sounds good.
Or whatever decision you make, I'm okay with. Just document the reasons for why it was someplace other than the key directory. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that PR? I think it would be good to get that done, and then we just have to derive the documentation pieces of it, just the caption, so we don't keep having the discussions over and over again. So that's good.
I don't have other comments on this. I just wanted to make another comment that came from something that occurred to me that came from a comment that Marcela made on the other PR regarding the documentation. The documentation, and specifically the values in the that we have in the APIs for the transaction processor. So in the transaction processors, we have, in the API, we have the MR enclave base name and IS public key. And what I was thinking about was the base name, which we enforce in the transaction processor. So there must be a certain base name. But that means that everyone who at every e-service that performs the attestation of the enclave, that has to register the enclave, has to use the same speed, essentially. First, they have to use the same speed. Second, whoever does the verification of the quote with IIS must be the owner of that speed. Okay, things will change once EPID goes away, but this is something interesting that came up by thinking
So
about
do we,
that policy.
okay, so this is a good point, and I think this is exactly the kind of discussion we should have on this. So can we, again, if I can make a suggestion, it would be that you and Prakash have this discussion on the Discord channel. And then
Okay.
actually put it in an issue where we're talking about the design. And then copy, I mean, start with the dialogue about what the right thing to do is in an issue. That's probably the best case rather than the Discord channel, but start the discussion in the issue. And then capture the design in a document.
Yeah, it makes sense. Things will change completely with DIGAP, I suppose, but it makes sense.
I had also raised some questions around policy changes too, right? That were in that document in an earlier version of the PR. So I'm trying to remember exactly what that was, but there was definitely some text in there about consortium members being able to change policies, and I think we need to think more about like what the implications are of policy changes, and yeah, honestly, just expectations there too.
Yeah, and I don't. It is not my intention that we open the discussion about what the right things to do are. I think, and you know, Prakash has created the protocol for us. Now the actual policies and the structure of the policies is something that I think is the next round of discussion. So we've got an initial policy out there. It is not unreasonable. We may want to adjust it going forward, but I think the protocol itself is consistent for it. I mean, as far as when we make the changes. So
I think this discussion was triggered by one sentence that Prakash wrote, which was something like the consortium is permitted to change the policy subject to
yep.
the rules, something like that. Which, if we consider the model, well, yes, in the end, the consortium runs the CCF network, so in theory, it can do anything, but there is no functionality really.
So can I make a comment? Can I make a
Well,
comment?
the policy, the initial policy would be around what are the values for base name MR enclave, whatever, that are acceptable for enclaves. Let me just stop here for a second and say what we have right now, even if we can never change it, what we have right now is a starting point. It is not the ending point. We need to think a lot more about what evolution of policies looks like. In particular, things like, well, we found a bug in an old version of the contract enclave. How do we handle that? We want to add a new set of functionality to a particular interpreter, or we have two versions of the interpreter, some of which have TensorFlow support and some of which don't. How do we handle that for the distinctions between the enclaves? There's a bunch of open questions about sort of long-term running of a ledger that have not been discussed, and we're now to the point we need to have that discussion. So Marcella's question is exactly the right question. And now I'm asking Bruno, you and Prakash to go back and have the dialogue about what we need, what the requirements are, not about how it works right now. I do not care how it works right now, but we need to have the requirements for what it would look like, what we have to have for policy support. If, for example, we want to run a ledger for a year rather than 30 minutes. So this is not critique whatsoever about the existing policy. It's about what we have to do going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to clarify what I meant when I wrote the sorry.
We did, Prakash, we're fine with what you wrote. We don't need clarification. What I need is a set of requirements for what it looks like going forward. Yeah, your stuff is fine, right?
No, that is true. I mean, this is very related to what Marcella is also asking. So I'm just saying, so I mean, the point, what I had in my mind when I said that's subject to like agreement among the consortium, essentially what I really meant, what I had in my mind was that, yes, we need the policy. We don't have the policy. Whatever Marcella is asking is the question that we have to answer. But the point is, what CCF really allows you is to implement that policy as the CCF consortium's governance policy with their CCF's governance script. So whatever policy that we come up with, we can make use of CCF's governance scripts to actually easily implement it. That was the only intent when I wrote it.
Yeah, and like I said, Prakash, we're fine with what was written, and it's not done.
Yeah,
so
it's not done.
The request is take the comments that you just made, and go put them in an issue.
Yeah.
To sort of kick off the policy discussion dialogue. I mean, you're exactly right. I'm not the debate is not over what the PR said or what the README said in it right now. The debate needs to shift to what is the right set of policies? What are the requirements for managing policy if we think about a ledger that runs for a year? Right, we do not even have requirements listed for what it would take to do it, let alone the mechanism for doing it in CCF. Right. So I think we need to start having this discussion and get to the point where we can think through the requirements for
and do you think it makes sense to have that discussion in the context of DCAP and not EPID?
That's a good question, Bruno. Bruno and Marcelo, what do you think about that? I think we're going to be stuck with EPID for a while. At least we've got one more year.
Yeah, 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should also start with EPID. It's like it's like we have a pretty good understanding of it, right? So.
And I think there are two sets of issues here, Prakash. There's issue number one is what are the properties we use to decide that a particular enclave meets our criteria? The second question is, how do the set of criteria evolve over time? Under what circumstances and what kinds of behavior do we want to support with the evolution of those values? the first one of those, the difference between decap and EPIT makes a huge difference. The second one is completely independent of the underlying attestation mechanism. It's really about what triggers an evolution of or an acceptance of a different set of values.
If I may make one suggestion, maybe one example of a policy that we could start thinking is like how to add another enclave that is attested via decap. So that is already a policy.
So put that in the
Yeah,
requirements.
so
So
we
put that in the
yeah,
requirements
sure,
document.
sure,
And
yeah.
I don't, and I don't think it's, I think you need to generalize even that because you're still too much on the implementation of the value spaces, right?
Yeah.
It's as the attestation mechanism changes, how do we support heterogeneous enclaves?
Yeah.
I mean, the real question you're asking is, you know, we have heterogeneity in the attestation mechanisms. How do we support that?
Yeah.
Right. That I think it's a great requirement. Add that requirement to the document or to the issue or whatever.
Sure.
So that is exactly the right question. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Let's see. Is there anything else, Bruno, Marcella, that you wanted to bring up, Prakash, on the hardware support?
Yeah, so I don't know if we discussed this morning, but last time me and Bruno were chatting, and during the last times the same call. So one thing that we like understood and agreed was that Bruno's PR that he published yesterday, that is essentially to enable like hardware mod with Docker, but we still have to test to see if hardware mode runs in bare metal. That is to be done. So I don't, yeah.
Well, I would argue if he can get it running in the Docker images that it will run in bare metal. We just have to document the right way to do it.
Okay, yes.
Because really the PR does not do anything other than invoke bare metal functions, but inside a completely constrained container.
Right.
So there's as long as we get the documentation right, it better work.
Yeah, I'm not touching
Bruno,
the code.
you don't see any reason why
scripts.
that wouldn't. Yeah, you don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case, right?
No, I'm just touching scripts and YAML files of Docker Compose. So
Yeah, but except that it is e-service container is going to register to call the register policy like RPC, right? From inside the container, and that container started.
Why is that any? Right, but why is that any different than what the documentation would tell you to do outside the container?
Correct. So like you say, there
It's
should
just
be
documentation.
correct. There should be documentation to say how to invoke or like how to start an e-service that would allow registration of the policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my point, Prakash, is this is not a functional issue. This is just let's just make sure the documentation is there.
Yes.
So. Okay. Anything else on the hardware support?
nope.
Okay. Then I have two things that I wanted to just kind of bring up quickly on stuff that I'm working. So we have the persistent service database. And I just went through yesterday. I got frustrated with the service groups stuff. And I will be putting together a PR for moving the service groups out of the different TOML files that we have and into a persistent database. So we add the service groups to a database rather than trying to make sure we load the correct set of TOML files on each invocation for it. Bruno, you're not going to like this because it's touching an awful lot of stuff where we had built-in assumptions about the TOML files. So it's going to be one of those PRs. that you hate. For it, but
Not a 50
this-
lines one.
this is not a 50 lines one. No, no. And this is the reason why I've been holding off is that it touches so many different places for it. So, but I do think it will really clean up how we handle the service groups, which is becoming a big problem as I'm starting to work through a bunch of the interface issues on Jupyter parts of it.
Typical claim of a developer. Gonna simplify.
In this case, the transition is going to be painful. I mean, excruciatingly painful. But I think it will make a lot of sense when I get to the other side. So, so that would be surprised to see that coming. And then Prakash, thanks for merging the other Jupyter PR. So the idea, there's inside that PR, there's a thing that's the key manager notebook, which kind of hints at a little bit of what I want and have in progress for services, service groups. And there's one more. Services, service groups. I can't remember. Oh, the configuration file, the configuration file sort of editor for it. So all of that is intended to make things a little bit easier for it. That does mean we should be able to, once I get all of that stuff done, what I want to do is to go back and have the getting started page actually basically take the start from scratch and build the configuration files and create all the keys and import the service files that you want through a single interface for building that front. So that's the gist of it for what's coming next. So, all right. Anybody else have topics, opens, questions?
Yeah, I think maybe in the last, I don't know how long this will need. But I know a couple months ago we had started talking about getting the PDO repo sort of scorecard compliant. So OpenSSF scorecard is this sort of set of 19 metrics and best practices for open source repositories. It's a software supply chain best practices check. And essentially what you do is you run a tool as part of your CI workflow, and it essentially creates this little badge that you can put in your repository and sort of indicate your score, but it also, again, based on those like 19 metrics, it tells you where you have gaps and where you're doing well. So yeah, that is related to the Dependabot issue that I opened a while ago too, because Dependabot, or I should say rather, dependency tracking is one of the metrics of scorecard. So I started a document a while ago to track this.
So where is your document?
I think it's in my fork of the repo, so I haven't pushed it upstream.
Okay, so
yeah,
can I just side conversation, but it's related. You have the GHA Dependabot alerts out there. Can we either get that included, or which is my preference is that we figure out how to include it, or get rid of it?
but do you, so we
PR
do you already have
455 is your Dependabot PR. It's now been out there for 4 months.
Yes. I had paused that since we had talked about doing a broader supply chain best practices assessment. So I don't mind closing that PR in favor of getting the scorecard scanner in first, and then adding Dependabot as part of that. The other question too, though, is I don't
So
know
do you have
that.
hang on one sec, do you have an issue associated with this yet?
I do. I'm trying to find it. Oops. One second. Got logged out of GitHub for some reason. Yes. So I have an issue. It doesn't mention scorecard, but I think it mentions it's issue 432. Make this best practice compliant. I think I mentioned several other frameworks.
Okay.
Posted in the chat.
So is this one of those things where we should add your dependent bots, for example, in here, and then we can clean up what you have as a dependent bot PR, reference it here, and then move forward?
Yeah. So what you mean is actually resolve the Dependabot PR.
I'm
and get
suggesting
that-
that we make the dependent bot PR, modify it so that we can really adopt it. Let's get it into the repo.
Okay. Yeah.
And then what I'm saying is, let's take this issue, and then the issue becomes kind of the
Mhm.
set of tasks that we have to, the high level representation for the set of tasks that has to be completed for this, and we could just mark them off one at a time as we get them done.
Yeah, sounds good. I had a very high level task list, but that was more
Yeah, I'm
sort
looking
of,
at it right now.
yeah, that's not, of course.
It
or
is very
not-
high level. And
Yeah.
mapping each of those into, okay, what is the stuff we really need to do would be helpful.
Yeah. That is what the document was about. And so, yeah, I will push that document upstream. It's just,
Where you want to just
Yeah.
push the document into the issue without be the, here's my reasoning for it is,
okay.
I don't know where the document would go, first off, and it really is an implementation plan rather than a specific part of the implementation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's,
So I would put it in the
Yeah.
issue, which is where we want the sort of the planning for the implementations to take place.
okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think given our discussion today too, what I had written up no longer fully applies, so I need to update that
Okay.
as well.
And again, I think you get complete support for pushing for repository scores and in general, just better management of the repository.
Yeah, I'll
So-
also say there's an internal mandate to do this. So
Okay. All right, good. Any other, okay, so Marcella, let me, so,
yeah, I can definitely take the AR on this.
so I think that captures what we're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, are there any other opens for today? So Prakash, were you able to have a conversation with David about kind of what's the next round of things we can do for community development?
Yeah, so we just had email exchanges. I think two things are in my mind. One is we do a per quarter larger community meeting, like what we
Uh-huh.
did in the first quarter, to give updates on PDO and applications to a broader audience, right? That should help. And the other is we need to identify and target other Hyperledger communities where we could go and attend and possibly advertise PDO as a solution candidates to the problems that they're facing. I don't have quick sanitized list of where I want to go, but if there are suggestions, I'm like happy to take them.
So
And
kind of going
I
back
know
to
that,
that,
yeah, I know that you also wanted to consider the time zone, the time for this call, right?
yeah, we had that discussion. I
Okay,
think we're
okay,
gonna
okay,
push
okay.
for.
Sure, yes.
So there's us, find the slot on opposite weeks from the FPC and make that suggestion to Dave.
Okay,
And I think we'll just make it work for ourselves.
okay.
Sorry, there's one more thing that what was I thinking?
On the topic of attending other calls.
Oh yeah, other calls. Sorry. I think there's two directions we could go with that. I think one of them would be to go back and look at some of the identity work and see if there's anything that's happening there that we could get involved in. I don't know about that. The other one might be to go look at the community to practice groups and actually see if they're running into problems that we think we could develop solutions for.
Mhm.
That would be a second way of doing the engagement with them.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Anything else for today? All right, then let's go ahead and close it out.
Thank you.
Bruno, thanks for sharing the notes doc.
Yep.
And
Thank
all
you.
right, thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Good talk.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.